Good morning, everybody. I'm Balaji Venkateshwaran. I'm the CEO of Ryzgo. Thank you for the opportunity to present to all of you. I want to start by saying that Ryzgo is not a project. It's a company. We're based in Silicon Valley, California, founded and advised by a number of people who have been serial entrepreneurs. We have done this, started companies, built and sold companies several times over the last couple of decades. So what does Ryzgo do? We're developing a platform for a priori trust and security in the blockchain ecosystem. Now the keyword here is a priori. The question you'll ask is, why do you need trust and security in the blockchain ecosystem? The reality is blockchain is very good at recording information as transactions happen. So when I send $100 to John over there, who's one of our advisors, by the way, when I send John $100 to buy a used bike from him, the fact that I sent him the $100 is recorded in an immutable fashion on the blockchain. But it doesn't help answer the question, why should I trust John enough to send him the $100 in the first place to buy the bike and expect that he will send me the bike in the shape and form that he has described it? That's what I mean. It's the notion of trustworthiness. How do you enable participants, whether they're individuals or businesses, on this blockchain ecosystem to be able to trust each other and to transact with each other? Why is that a problem? The reality is that every issue that has plagued the traditional internet world in terms of identity theft, fraud, bankruptcies, non-payments, phishing, money laundering, all of these things are affecting blockchain as well. And if anything, the incidence of all of that is going to increase over time as blockchain gets mainstream adoption. So before an individual like myself would transact with somebody else on the blockchain, I would ask myself three fundamental questions. Okay, before I send John, for example, the $100, who are you? Are you really who you claim to be? Because just because you say you're John Bantelman, it doesn't mean you really are. You might have stolen that person's identity. And what do I know about you that I can trust you enough to do that? Okay. So how do we solve this problem? Our solution hinges on four fundamental pillars that roughly answer the questions that I've asked you. The first pillar of our solution is the identity, assertion of identity. It answers the question of who are you. Okay. Now I want to stress here that we are not an identity company like Civic, Sovereign, Uport, and others. Okay. There are aspects of our solution that use this notion of a immutable, cryptographically secure digital identity. In fact, we are going to be partnering. We are in conversations with a couple of these ID providers to partner with them to wrap our ID, notion of our ID around their ID to enhance and track additional information. But the notion of a Ryzgo ID is very fundamental and foundational to our solution. On top of that, we build what is called our fraud detection mechanism. It answers the question of, are you really who you claim to be? Okay, just because John says I'm John doesn't mean that it is him. That identity might have fallen into the wrong hands. So it's not enough to assert and verify a person's identity when the identity is established. It is just as important to verify and validate it on an ongoing basis. And that's where fraud detection capabilities come into the picture. And we've brought over technology that we developed in my previous company, a company called Layer 8 Security, where we did fraud detection and behavior analytics to detect anomalies in user behavior for the web environment. We sold the company last year, but we retained some of the IP to that, and we brought that over. So using a variety of techniques, particularly using patented behavior analytic techniques, we are able to discover and to ensure that the person asserting a particular identity continues to be the holder of that identity. Now, the third aspect of our solution is what we call the protocol. The protocol is nothing but a mechanism that defines a way for the ecosystem to capture trusted transactions amongst people, and to report those activities when requested. The fourth aspect of our solution is, how do you use all of this information to answer the fundamental questions? Can I really trust you to, to fulfill your end of the bargain? So we use all of this information about the identity, the risks associated with that identity, the fraud mechanisms, markers that we've detected, as well as your past activities, and we've developed mathematical models to consume all of that data and come up with a trust score or a reputation score that is contextual. So this is very key, because just because I trust you to drive a car well doesn't mean I trust you to give me sound financial advice. So trust is contextual, and we have created mathematical models to understand how trust percolates through the human network, through activity networks, as well as through certain contexts. Okay, all of this is wrapped into what we call the Ryzgo Trust Passport. The net effect of all of this is that you as a user control it, you own it, you control it, you decide who gets access to it, when and for how long. Okay. So as a platform, we enable and we serve a number of potentially a number of use cases. It spans pretty much the gamut of all the way from peer-to-peer, business to business, community use cases, and consumer use cases. But our focus, at least at our launch, is going to be on high-value financial transactions from a B2B and a B2B2C sort of kinds of use cases. All right. So what are the business drivers that we are looking at? Why is something like this even needed? The reality is, lots and lots of applications are currently being built for the blockchain ecosystem and will continue to be built. So practically in theory, every application that's being built could potentially use our platform as a foundational trust element. The number of users adopting the blockchain ecosystem is growing over time. And the reality is, before blockchain sees mass adoption, you require this foundational element of trust to be able to establish amongst the individuals participating in the ecosystem. And growth in value. If you look at what Gartner has estimated, it's expected that blockchain will enable $76 billion worth of financial transactions by 2025. That's a tremendous amount of growth that is going to require this foundational trust element to fuel it. Ours is an ecosystem play. Sorry, the colors are a little bit difficult to see there. Ours is an ecosystem play, as I said. We are a platform that resides on top of DLTs, the underlying DLTs. So think of the digital ledger technologies like Ethereum and Hedera, Hashgraph, and Neo and EOS and others as your foundational database layer, that don't necessarily have any inkling of or understanding or semantics of the data. We add the trust semantics on top of it by saying, for transactions or for individuals to trust each other, this is the information that needs to be captured, this is how it needs to be captured, and how it needs to be captured. Above that is what how we view the trust stack as forming. People are going to build trust communities, private communities, so that individuals can trust, implicitly trust each other within those communities. Trust analytics, take data both on-chain and off-chain, come up with advanced analytics and give that information to institutions, especially financial institutions, for them to make some major financial decisions in terms of whether it's making loans or mortgages or whatever the case may be. And above that is the application layer. And these are just some examples of the kinds of applications that could potentially be built in this trust ecosystem. All right. The way we have architected our system is it's a two-tier system, and while the final data is going to be stored in the public or in the underlying blockchain like Ethereum, we are developing our own network that resides on top of it for a couple of reasons. One is, especially public blockchains, they are extremely expensive and they don't scale as well, and so building our own network alleviates some of those issues. And secondly, while this picture doesn't illustrate that, Our intention is, in fact, we have already started executing towards it. Our intention is to support multiple underlying DLTs. Okay, so while we're going to start with Ethereum, we are actually going to be announcing a partnership in the next in any day now with Hedera Hashgraph, and we'll continue to announce further partnerships with other underlying DLTs, including private and permission blockchains, which is where the reality is. It's in the permission in the private blockchains is where a lot of the high value financial transactions are going to happen, at least in the near future. So I've just talked about this architecture and the advantages of doing it this way. So let's talk about the competitive advantage. So one of the things that I've heard from several people is, well, you're like an ID provider like Civic, Sovereign, and others. The reality is we are not. We are well beyond that. So ours, I believe that ours is the only company that is the most complete vision out there in terms of providing a holistic 360-degree view of a participant in the blockchain ecosystem to enable trust to happen between people. Our layered approach, it gives us the ability to not only support multiple blockchain ecosystems, but also to grow and expand the reach of our solution both horizontally and vertically. Our technology, not only, as I mentioned, our two-tier architecture allows us to support multiple ecosystems, but we have actually, as I mentioned to you a little bit earlier, we have brought over some very critical and very foundational fraud detection technology and IP from my previous company that nobody else in the blockchain ecosystem is currently working on. Right? The team. One of the biggest strengths we have is the team that we have assembled. We all of the founders have many years of experience founding, building, and selling many companies over the last couple of decades. Peter Watkins, the chairman of the company, he and I worked at a couple of companies before. He used to be the CEO of McAfee. He was the CEO of Resonate. He was the CEO of WebRoot and Elemental Security, and also the co-founder of my previous company, Layer 8 Security. My background, I've been working for over 2 decades in technology. Started, with network management systems. Worked at a company called Evolve Software and John Bantelman. That's where I worked with John Bantelman. This was in the late 90s and early 2000s when I was relatively younger and had hair. And John Bantelman was the CEO of the company. He took us public in 2000. And I have bruises from my work at Evolve because that was our first large. It was at that time we were building the largest enterprise software in the Java environment. And as you can imagine, just like blockchain is going through growing pains right now, Java was going through growing pains at that point of time. So I know what it takes to build scalable solutions on technology that's still in its nascent stages. And after that, I worked for a company called Guardian Edge Technologies. I was a VP of engineering there. We built encryption software. In fact, the US Navy is the largest deployment of encryption software ever in the world. Even today, all of their endpoints are encrypted using Guardian Edge's technology. Guardian Edge, I ended up selling Guardian Edge to Symantec, stayed on there for a couple of years, then founded Layer 8 Security, which I sold last year, and Ryzgo is my current passion. We've been working on this for the last 9-10 months. Snehal Karia is again lots of years of experience as a VP of engineering and CTO at several companies. He has also been a co-founder. Karuna Ramachandran is our data scientist. She's been a data scientist since way before data science even became a sexy term. She spent a decade at a company called Exponent Failure Analysis, analyzing industrial failures, and another decade at Intuit, doing data analysis for their small business unit. And then there's a bunch of other people. So we actually spent a little bit of time a few months ago analyzing and looking at the volume of transactions that we've collectively been involved in. We discovered that we had over $5 billion worth of fundraising, M&A, and IPO activities amongst us over the last couple of decades. As far as advisors are concerned, again, a very strong set of advisors. Mark Green was one of our earliest backers. He loved the idea. He used to be the CEO of Fair Isaac and FICO. It is the preeminent credit scoring mechanism, company in the United States. He was also GM of IBM's banking unit, and was also an economist at the Federal Reserve Board. John Bantelman, the gentleman who's here, who's been, who was a CEO of Rainstore, Evolve, LBMS, took a couple of companies public, and so on and so forth. Christian Ferry, well known in the blockchain ecosystem, understands. He's an expert and a speaker at a number of conferences, and he's been quoted at. He's appeared in Al Jazeera and Bloomberg and other places. Dushika Lukacs, who's actually based in London, and oh, there you are. I'm meeting her for the first time. So Dushika is here as well. She's her background is with the Austrian Volksbank, World Bank, CEO of Zero Xcert, where that closed its ICO recently. Rich Ornstein, CFO, General Counsel of a number of companies, took a couple of companies public, based in the Bay Area. Samir Kumar, based out of Southeast Asia, Director of derivatives trading at Deutsche Bank and RBS and a couple of other companies. Okay, and we will be announcing a couple of more advisors that we're going to be adding over the next few weeks, in the coming weeks. So as far as milestones are concerned, our platform is still in development. We expect to release our alpha version in early Q4 and launch the network in Q1 of next year. All right. Funding. We are doing things a little bit differently. Because we are a company based in the United States, we got to worry about the SEC and its rulings about what is a regulated and what is not a regulated offering, and so on and so forth. So while we are raising, we're close to finishing our seed round of $2 million. We will be offering what is known as a security token. So it'll be a regulated token blessed by the SEC. Because no matter how you look at it, except for barring a few exceptions like Ethereum and Bitcoin, every other coin out there, according to the SEC, will be classified as a security, even though it might have a utility value to it.
The seed round is equity?
Sorry?
The seed round is equity?
Yes, seed round is an equity round. Okay, so given the fact that every coin out there is expected to be, or is really a security, we can't fight the SEC. We're not going to fight them. We're going to call it a security token, offer investors a 10% dividend on on net revenue. Now, for certain investors, we may, in addition to that, give them equity in a post seed round at post seed round valuation, depending on the amount of money they're going to invest and the strategic value that they bring to the table, and so on and so forth. All right. We formally have not started our token sale process. We will be starting soon. So it's these are still early days for us from a fundraising perspective, but we are happy to have conversations from people who are interested in investing in us. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions. I don't know if how am I doing on time?
We have 2 minutes left, and so we can take 2 questions, and again, use the mic.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I think I'd like to make a differentiation between 2 things, which is blockchain services or services for the blockchain and blockchain ecosystem. In terms of services for the blockchain ecosystem, you seem to have an offering which combines aspects of fraud detection, fraud analysis, chain analysis, and you seem to have a very, very credible team that can do that. But there also seems to be a second thing which you're looking to do, which is blockchain development and implementation of this on the blockchain, which I requires an entirely different set of expertise, is very, very difficult in and of itself, is a wholly different focus. And also, and I suppose my question is, given that it doesn't appear to be necessary for you to execute your plan, why?
So that's a very good question. Unlike the internet, where the foundational element of trust was never built in, and so every ecosystem like eBay and Amazon and others built their own trust models after the fact, we have an opportunity in blockchain to actually build it as a foundational element into the blockchain ecosystem. So the fact is that as a horizontal platform that gets built on blockchain, we are enabling the blockchain ecosystem to develop, in a manner that engenders trust amongst the participants in a much more natural way. So for the dApps to use our platform, right, it is important for us to be actually building our layer onto the blockchain, and more importantly, because we want to give users like yourself the ability to control access to their data, putting it on the blockchain actually makes it a lot easier and gives us the ability to do so in a much more natural way, rather than centralizing it and building a centralized application. Does that answer your question? Okay. Sure.
So, thank you so much for this presentation, Balaji. It seems like you are doing a great job. You have a very impressive team. How much have you raised so far?
In terms of the seed round, we are going to be closing it in the next few weeks. As far as the token round is concerned, we've got commitments for about 2.5 million so far.
Out of 20.
Out of 20.
And the total valuation is around 70 million, right?
Total valuation? Yes.
Uh-huh.
I mean, in terms of token valuation, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And who is supporting you in soft commitments so far? You have institutional investors.
Institutional. It's an investment fund in Dubai that has committed 2.5 million by itself. And again, as I said, we have not formally started the conversations with people. This is all inbound interest that we've gotten so far.
Thank you.
And as part of the 20 million, as I said, to certain strategic investors, we are happy to talk about giving equity in addition to the tokens.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Okay.